may be seated in Jesus' name. I want to, first of all, begin. We are continuing our teaching this month, looking at this whole title of abundance, not redundance. And I want to talk about that in just a moment. But to position ourselves for this particular portion of Scripture today, as you see in your outlines, will come from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, a very familiar portion of Scripture. And it may be one that we may not have thought about regarding abundance in the past. The question I raise for us right now, have you ever felt like you've been sucker punched? Yes. Ever had a time where something occurred, where you, out of nowhere something came up and you just felt like this? And here's the interesting point. It's almost expected from folk who you can't stand and folk who don't like you. But when we're hit with news or betrayal or something that comes up, it's always very challenging. It's always very, and it catches us off guard. And it's always disappointing to be sucker punched. Is that not right? Yes. Amen. It's always discouraging and also leaves us in the state of disbelief. But it is especially troubling when it comes from people who are close to us and people, those that we love, and those that we would never expect to do that. Can somebody say amen to that right there? You almost expect a sucker punch from somebody over here who's always acted cold and callous towards you anyway. But from somebody close to you, that you love, that you would never expect it to happen, it becomes even more challenging when this happens to us in life, where you were expecting them to be on your side, and they end up sucker punching you as well. So let me just kind of get up. The first time I ever saw, back to this picture right here, ever saw somebody knocked out cold, I was playing PB basketball. And I'm playing PB basketball, we're on the same team, and one of my neighbors who lived 2 houses away from me, we were good friends growing up. We were all on the same team. You know how all the neighborhood kids are on the same team and everything. And he did foul somebody pretty hard going up for a basket, but it wasn't, earth-shattering. Well, the person who got fouled, this is at the beginning, our practice only went like 1 hour, so this may have been 5 minutes into practice. The one who got fouled remembered that for the entire practice. And 15 minutes later, almost at the time the practice was over, he touched the guy who fouled him on the shoulder and did a windmill and came from the ground and popped him so hard in the face, knocked him out cold. And I just remember our coach looking around and said, "What are you doing? We are on the same team." Then here's an issue. Sometimes the sucker punching comes from the folk on our same team. Sometimes the sucker punch comes from the folk who ought to be heading in the same direction. And if somebody's going in another direction, you almost would expect it. But it's especially disappointing when somebody is close to us, somebody we love, and somebody we would never expect to have this happen as well. This is where we find Paul in our text today. Paul had been ministering. Now, we're going to be looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 4, which implies there was already a 1 Corinthians. And Paul is writing these letters back and forth, trying to address the concerns that come up. This letter is really about people trying to undermine Paul. These are the same folk that Paul had helped, shared meals with, prayed for, and tried to go back in. And as a result, these are the people who go connect with Paul's enemies to try to end up taking him down. You would expect that to happen once again from folk who always showed their avarice against us. But those people who were close to us, we loved, and those we expected, these same people that Paul served and ministered to and shared with and sacrificed for are the ones who turn up. Have you ever had somebody like that in your life where you got up in the middle of the night to help them and they didn't say thank you? You went and tried to go back in and try to be a blessing to them, and then in turn they talk about you like a dog. At some point, sucker punching occurs in the life of every believer. So what is it? So let's tell you where we're going to go with our message today. Paul experienced all of these challenges, just sucker punched by people he prayed for and had shared meals with and sacrificed for. But the question really is, what happens in the midst of all that Paul was still able to keep on going? See, sometimes a sucker punch is not some of us out and we don't want to see the person again, don't want to go forward anymore. But Paul kept on going despite being sucker punched. This is the portion of Scripture that says that we've been cast down but not destroyed, forsaken and not forsaken. The idea was Paul is saying that in the midst of all this going on, sucker punching may have occurred, but he had some revelation. And he had an understanding of how to keep on going when everybody else stopped. So what's the difference between Christians who get sucker punched and stay down and those that get right back up? What's the difference between those when life comes against us and tries to take us out, but it takes us up higher? What's the difference that goes on this point? And Paul gives us the key. That whenever this sucker punching occurs, and it's going to occur, if you've not been sucker punched, get ready. If all this goes on, what happens? That we're still able to go forward anyhow. So here's Paul. Read this with me from 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 24 through 25 from NLT. These are some things that happened to Paul. And in the midst of this, he still keeps on going. Please read this together. 5 different times, the Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. 3 times, I was beaten with rods. Keep going. Once I was stoned. 3 times, I was shipwrecked. Once I spent a whole night and day adrift at sea. And in the midst of all that, Paul is still the same one that says, I have learned to be content in whatever state I'm in. I have learned, I have grown, I know something about the Lord that helps me still be content. Look what he went through here. He is beaten, he is lashed. This is the same Paul now, remember. Look in pictures. Shipwreck, same Paul in that top corner right here on the right side there, that in Acts chapter 16, at midnight started praising God, although they were in the inner stock, in the inner prison there. The same Paul, look what he says, I've been beaten and shipwrecked and stoned and left for dead. And in the midst of it all, I have learned, I have connected with God in such a way that I'm not going to allow when somebody sucker punches me to keep me down. I may get knocked down, I may stumble for a while, but I shall rise. I may go down for a minute, but I'm going to get up. With God on my side and with God in me, for me, and around me, I am still going to go forward. That's what Paul is sharing with us right now. So please read this. This is really from the Amplified class. This is really our text today. Read this with me, please. Now, you can write this down as well. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 8 through 9. The teaching comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, the whole chapter. But our focus in particular today is really on verse 7, which we'll get to in just a moment. Verses 8 and 9 as well. So please read 8 and 9 with me together. This is Paul's. Now, this is Paul. In the midst of that, here's what's happening. People he has ministered to, shared with, prayed for, sacrificed for, got what they wanted from Paul, and then went out and got with Paul's enemies and said, he's not all that after all. I know him. He ain't all that. In the midst of these people, they were in his inner circle, go out and start telling things against him and about him, trying to take him down. So let's read what Paul says as a result of this. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. He didn't say afflicted now. That's a whole afflicted, not afflicted. We don't do afflicted. Keep going. Perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. So look at the first part. He's been afflicted, perplexed, persecuted, and struck down. But in the midst of all this, he says, but I'm not crushed. But I'm not driven to despair. But I'm not forsaken. But I'm not destroyed. How do we start living on the other side of the book? At some point, the problems come up, but I can't stay over there. Yeah, hurt has come up, but I still trust God. Pain has come up, but I know God is good. In the midst of all this going on, Paul says, and all this did happen. And I stayed over here before, but now I know the Lord. And now I know how good God is. And now I know how awesome God is. And now I refuse to allow myself to get sucker punched and stay down as well. That's what the whole message is all about today. So now this comes from the King James Version. Let's read this from King James, because there's a little variation here that we're going to talk about as well. Let's read this together. We are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. Keep going. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. So this is where we're going to focus our attention today. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and you can just write down 7, 8, and 9, because there are other verses in there that are beautiful. But the heart of the matter is, again, I need to see the hands. Anybody hit me with a sucker punch before? It was unexpected before. I'm talking, at some point, you raise the foot up. The idea is, at some point, it has to say, how is it that Paul got sucker punched and became better and not bitter? How is it that Paul was still able to go on and pray for folk who turned on him? How is it that Paul was able to experience all this hurt and all the shipwreck and everything? He said, I have still learned in whatever state I'm in, I'm just glad to be alive. I'm just glad to still be in the land of the living. I'm going to still honor God, and I will still trust God, and I will still rely on God. What did Paul know that some of us don't know? And what did Paul apply that we may not apply? That he still says, in the midst of being afflicted, perplexed, persecuted, and struck down, he was still not going to be crushed, not going to be driven to despair, not forsaken, and not destroyed. So here's our first one right here. This is from verse 8. I'm going to give, so now as you look at your outline now, we've already gone to A, B before. We did the UN last week, and I'm going to look at a few D and A's today, not D and A, but a D and an A today for that portion of scripture here. So it says right here, it says, so the first one is right here, driven not to despair, although we suffer. Driven not to despair, although we suffer. Driven not to despair, although we suffer. So what Paul is saying, yes, suffering has occurred, but this suffering is not going to drive me to despair. Suffering occurred, but it's not going to cause me to despair. So Paul said, even though challenges have come up, and even though hurt has come up, and even though issues have come up, I am still not going to be driven to despair. Here's what happens. Sometimes when suffering occurs, and hurt occurs, and betrayal occurs, and difficulty occurs, it drives us directly into despair. And Paul is saying, yeah, I know I have been sucker punched. I know folk I tried to help turn their back on me. I know the folk that should be for me have not gone against me. I know things are not going like they should. I know at this point I've been afflicted in every way, but I'm not crushed. I've been perplexed, I'm not driven to despair. I've been persecuted, I'm not forsaken. I have been struck down, but I am not destroyed. Why? I am not going to go to despair, although suffering has occurred. Everybody has gone through some suffering. Your suffering may not be mine, and mine may not be yours, but everybody in here has gone to experience suffering. So what is it that Paul recognized that did not allow him to go from suffering to despair? Look right here. First of all, despair simply means this. Despair comes from the Greek word that means no way out. Utterly lost. No solution. Paul is saying, yeah, I suffered. But I'm not going to feel like I got no way out. I suffered, but I'm not going to feel like I'm utterly at a loss. I suffered, but I'm not going to feel like there's no solution. And too many believers are living like this. Life is just a maze. Just find themselves just somewhere, like not knowing where to go, getting up to this day and just confused this day and not sure where to go. And sometimes feel like they're just lost. Thought by now you'd be doing this. You just knew 20 years ago, 20 years later, you're not looking like it is right now, just looking lost. And sometimes feel like everything you've done has gotten you to a dead end. You keep trying, you keep praying, even fasting 1 minute longer than the church asks you to do on Tuesday morning. And as a result of it, still feel lost, still feel at that point at a dead end. And too often believers are feeling trapped, feeling like there's no way out. Trying and praying and trusting and trusting, and you see everybody else seeming to walk in overflow and abundance, and it seems like that ship is just passing by. What did Paul know at this point? And sometimes, read this with me please, sometimes we feel like we live inside a place that seems to have no way out. You ever been there before? I'm telling you, at some point, and if we are real honest, in the midst when nobody else was around, in the midnight hour, when we started going through difficulty and things did not look good, it felt like at this point, because of things that were going around in us and going on to us and what was around us, it felt like there was sometimes no way out. And Paul said, in the midst of my suffering, I am not going to spare. Why? Because I'm trusting God to be a way maker. Anybody here know God's a way maker? I said, does anybody know that God is a way maker? said I got to trust in the midst of all my suffering that I still